Now, in this week's edition of Let's Talk Some Star Wars, we'll be taking a look at the results of the poll that asked the question, what rating would you give Return of the Jedi? I'll also be reading and responding to some of your comments, showing off some of the artwork and other images that people sent in this week, and towards the end of the video, I'll highlight a couple other YouTube channels for you all to check out. But let's of course get started by taking a look at the results of the poll, where we'll see that 49% or nearly half of all voters gave this movie 4 stars. Another 43% gave it 5 stars, which then left just 6% to give it 3 stars, 1% to give it 2, and a final 1% to give it 1 star. Which, when we do all the math here, means Return of the Jedi got an average rating of 4.32 stars, and moves it into 3rd place overall with just one movie to go, that being The Last Jedi, the poll for which should already be up if you're watching this now. And just a quick note on that, if you are a fan of The Last Jedi, I do encourage you to of course vote and comment, because I don't plan on turning next week's video into a let's just bash The Last Jedi video, despite the fact that no, it's not likely going to do very well in the poll and in the comments, considering a lot of people who watch my videos and who vote in these polls are not fans of that movie. But again, if you are a fan of it and you want to say what you love about it or appreciate about it or just try to defend it, then there's a really good chance, considering I'm not expecting a flood of positive comments, that what you have to say will make the video. And no, I'm not just going to attack you if you like the movie. I really do like to discuss things with people, even when they disagree with me. Anyway, before getting to your comments on Return of the Jedi, let me just quickly say thank you for those comments. I do greatly appreciate just how many of you take the time each and every week to respond to these polls, despite the fact that only a handful make the video, because I ramble a bit too much. Anyway, thanks again for the comments, and to those of you who have been sending in your artwork as well, and do keep it coming, and if you want to send in something, send it to the email address found in the description below. And with all that said, let's once again start with the top rated comment, which this week came to us from Blackout501st, who said, Return of the Jedi has my favorite scene in all of Star Wars. Vader, knowing he's about to die, has Luke take off his mask. Vader has been a mechanical monster for decades, a soulless force of evil. But now, as he reaffirms to his son that he was right, no one is beyond redemption, he regains his humanity and quietly dies in his son's arms. It still chokes me up to this day. That's Star Wars right there, 5 out of 5. I couldn't agree more here. The whole Luke, Vader, Palpatine sequence is so perfect on so many levels that I really do need to devote a whole video to it someday in the near future. One of them being Anakin's fall in Revenge of the Sith very much mirrors his return to the light side in the appropriately named Return of the Jedi, because Anakin's essentially making the same decision each time, but for different reasons. In both cases, he's acting to try and save someone he loves. However, in Episode 3, his decision is a purely selfish one. He even admits after the fact that he's trying to save Padme because he can't live without her. He's betraying the Jedi and it doesn't even matter to him at this point. It was just something that had to be done to achieve his goal. But in Episode 6, he's doing the selfless thing. He's giving up everything he as a Sith has amassed. He's turning away from all his anger and hatred, from the dark side itself, and his lust for more power, which fuels all Sith whether they like it or not. And it sends them down a nearly inescapable downward spiraling path, as Yoda basically warns Luke about in The Empire Strikes Back. And so here's Vader saving someone not necessarily for himself or because he'll get something out of it, because Vader at this point has to know even if he survives all this, there's no real life waiting for him after. The galaxy isn't going to forgive him for what he's done, but his son already has forgiven him. He already believes in him, and that's what actually brings Vader back. It's such an amazing scene on so many levels, as I said, and it's a sequence that I could go on and on about for hours, and I will make a video about it eventually. But for now, let's get to some of your comments on this scene, starting with this one from Obi-Wan Kenobi, who said, It's quite possibly the most satisfying conclusion I have ever seen for a movie series. I don't think any other film has ever done what Return of the Jedi did so perfectly, so emotionally, and with so much closure. Then there's this comment from SRJ34, who said, Though Return of the Jedi has some significant weaknesses, Luke's rejection of the Emperor is better than just about anything I've ever seen in any film. I'll never turn to the dark side. You've failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi like my father before me. That scene by itself elevates the rest of the movie. It's hard to imagine a better payoff than that for what's been set up for 3 movies. Then there's this comment by Ken Benobi, who said, The entire movie and Luke's journey is encapsulated in one scene, Luke being goaded into lashing out by Vader. As Vader searches for him in the dark, red lightsaber starkly standing out, The mood is set and the tension rises. John Williams' score is absolutely genius work, and to this day sends chills down my spine whenever I listen to it. Yeah, not a perfect film, which of the saga are really. I don't understand the hate it gets. That then brings us to this comment from Bush Ranger, who said, "This movie is the reason the sequel trilogy isn't doing well. It ended everything so well." And these comments here kind of touch on another incredible thing about Return of the Jedi, that it ended in a way that, of course, we always wanted to see more. We wanted to see what became of all these heroes we'd been following for 3 movies, but we didn't feel like we needed to see more. It didn't feel like there were any loose ends in regards to our main characters that needed to be tied up, because they'd all been tied up very nicely. Because of course Luke would go on to rebuild the Jedi Order. Of course Han and Leia would get married and have children. Of course the remnants of the Empire would be dealt with and a new Republic would rise. In all reality, we never needed an Episode 7. 6 ended in a way that, well, just undoing it is asking for disaster. And no, I'm not saying there was no need for the expanded universe to come along and to carry on the story after Episode 6. Because 2 things about the old EU, or Legends, or whatever you want to call it these days, it always felt more like a choice if you wanted to follow it, more so than if they'd made more movies. Meaning, and no disrespect intended at all here towards the EU, because I do love it, but it always felt like something separate from the movies. It was something different than if Lucas himself or someone else had made more quote-unquote official movies with all those original actors. Also, the EU honored what the movies had accomplished, what the 2 previous trilogies had done. In a nutshell, the EU was always about, well, post-Return of the Jedi, it was always about testing the new Jedi Order and the new Republic, not destroying them and saying they need to rebuild everything all over again like the sequel trilogy has done. And so, as I've said many times before, probably the greatest mistake the sequel trilogy made is telling the same story all over again. It's once again all about rebels versus Empire and one lone hero trying to bring the Jedi Order back. It doesn't honor the original trilogy as much as it tries to retell it in a slightly different way. Okay, let's now get to a comment that touches on one of the more criticized aspects of the film, and it comes to us from JDS Snake, who said, "It was really good, but Ewoks. Those things turned a great movie to average." And though I don't personally have an issue with Ewoks, and do keep in mind I was 5 years old when this movie came out and when I saw it, so I was the perfect age for Ewoks, I can certainly see and understand the issues people have with them. And many comments pointed out the fact that the Emperor had said that a legion of his best troops awaited the Rebel strike force, and they got bested by living teddy bears. All I can say to that is, well, at least they did show that some of the Ewoks got killed in this battle, that it wasn't a total rout by the Ewoks. I know that's a small consolation for those who hate them, but it is at least something. And it's certainly a shame that Lucas couldn't use Wookiees instead of Ewoks, like he originally planned to, thus maybe finally possibly giving Chewbacca some sort of story arc in the original trilogy, but the problem was Lucas couldn't find enough tall people to put into suits. Okay, our next comment here comes to us from Arya Alpine, who said, "Easily deserving of 5 stars, although I hated Lucas's decision to swap Lapti Nek with the horrendous Jedi Rocks song with the release of the 1997 special edition." And I'm right there with you on this one. It was a completely unnecessary change. And I also hated the fact that they took out Yub Nub, the song the Ewoks used to sing at the end of the movie, and replaced it with something more generic sounding. Then there's perhaps the biggest, most controversial change of all, taking out Sebastian Shaw's version of Anakin's Force Ghost and replacing it with Hayden Christensen. And I guess the idea here is that's what Anakin looked like when the Jedi version of him died. Either way, it doesn't really bother me too much because I feel like this was an attempt to insert something directly from the prequels into the original trilogy to help make a greater connection. Okay, our next comment here comes to us from Libera Tu Vida Ya, who said, "Let's face it, before we let the professional critics manipulate us, we all thought Empire Strikes Back was the boring one. And we, as children, or even as young ones, I was 15 when I saw all the saga films for the first time in VHS, we thought that Return of the Jedi was the best one of the 3 movies. Super emotional, the best lightsaber duel, Luke at his prime, and the Emperor. The best space battle, Darth Vader's redemption arc, and so on. If we make justice to our inner child, we must accept that this movie is the one we love the most." And, well, I do accept that because Return of the Jedi always has been and always will be my personal favorite. And though I wouldn't say I thought Empire was the boring one when I was a kid, because there's a lot of great action in it, like the Battle of Hoth and of course Luke vs. Vader, I'd certainly say there were a lot of things I didn't understand or even begin to appreciate until many years later. And that's why I think Empire is the better film overall, but again, it's still not my favorite. Alright, our next comment here comes to us from Tomahawk PWPT, who said, Return of the Jedi remains the movie that houses my favorite space battle of all time, the Battle of Endor. It's just pinnacle Star Wars for me. Absolutely. To this day, the space battle of Endor not only holds up, but is still probably the best looking space battle I've ever seen in a movie, though a close second place would have to go to the Battle of Scarif in Rogue One. Okay, let's get to a couple more comments before wrapping the video up. Starting with this one from Fallen Shadow Ninja, who said, This movie has the biggest range of highs and lows of any of the Star Wars movies to me. The space battle of Endor is incredible. The throne room scenes are absolute masterpieces of storytelling. But then there are the Ewoks. The ground battle of Endor continues to bug me to this day. Seeing the Empire suddenly fall apart because a bunch of furry creatures that were clearly there to sell toys to kids rubs me the wrong way. The battle over the pit of Carkoon is fantastic, but I have always felt like the opening scenes at Jabba's palace last a bit too long. Maybe because the bounty hunters and criminal underworld has always been the least interesting part of Star Wars to me. I'll give the movie a 4 stars for the poll, but it's much more a 3.5 out of 5 to me. I still consider this a good score and a great movie, but this, in my opinion, is the weakest movie of the original trilogy as a whole, despite having some of the most iconic scenes in all of Star Wars. That being said, the ending is perfect and was honestly made all the better by the prequels. It should have been the conclusion of the Skywalker saga. And finally here we have this comment from Guy Hobbins, who said, The movie is everything a conclusion to a sci-fi trilogy should be. A fitting end to character arcs, a beautiful space battle, and an eternal soundtrack. And I think these last two comments here really begin to sum up how most people feel about Return of the Jedi. Yes, there are problems with the film. There are things that truly bug people, like the Ewoks or the way Boba Fett was killed off. The plan to rescue Han also doesn't really make a ton of sense when closely examined. But overall, this film still manages to be a fun, enjoyable watch that has some of the most amazing scenes and sequences in the whole trilogy, and the whole saga really, that really begin to make up for its problems. Not to mention, it gives us one of, if not the most satisfying conclusions you could ever possibly imagine a story of this scope and scale having. Alright, now let me point you in the direction of 2 other YouTube channels out there. The first is Star Wars Legends, a channel that, as the name kind of implies, covers mostly the expanded universe, now called Legends. The other is Nick Nack's Plastic Planet, and he does reviews for premium, modern, retro, and vintage toys. Just do be warned, his content is a bit more mature in nature. The links to both of which can be found in the pinned comment below. And last up here, if you want to see your artwork in one of my videos, please do send it to me at the email address in the description below. Just keep in mind, if you want credit for it, to put your name or any links to your work right on the image, or I'll just assume you want to remain anonymous. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you thought of what I or anyone else had to say in regards to Return of the Jedi, or to check out one of the other channels I just mentioned, or to go vote and comment on the poll for The Last Jedi. Whatever you pick, let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.